guys, Mustached Tom here to review the video game Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So, I'm a little late on this one, but I mean, it is what it be sometimes when I can play this game and beat it 4 times and get, in the winds of mid-playing it, learned that it gets nominated for Game of the Year, then sweeps Game of the Year among several awards, and then shadow drops free DLC. Let me repeat that. Free DLC. I think that a masterpiece needs to be recognized for what it is. And what it is truly is exceptional. I mean, talking about an exceptional story. Masterclass. I mean, this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you have somehow not played at Clair Obscur Expedition 33, then I urge you at the beginning of this video to play the damn video game. That is how high my rating is. Just to let you know, is that I'm going to say, hey, check the thing out first. It's that damn good. In both story and gameplay. But I mean, that was to be expected at that point, when you were just matching tone for tone. So, I think a lot of people have done their fair share of reviews on Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and for simplicity's sake, I will only be referring to it as Expedition 33 for short. Just to shorten the title just a little bit here. Point being is that I've seen people review it, I've seen people make really bad attempts at even attempting to critique it, clearly never having played the game, so on and so forth, saying it's too French, which is stupid and dumb and pointless. But hey, here we are. So, the story begins with Gustave and Mealle, and you are in Mealle, a fictitious place that doesn't seem all that average by just looks alone, creating an instant atmosphere of something really fantastical. However, once Gustave meets his significant other in Sophie, and they go from person to person as you control them through the town, it is clear that something odd is happening in this quite elaborate-looking town. We learn quite expeditiously, if I may add, about the Gamage. Everybody seems to be talking about it, going toward the harbor to investigate or celebrate, quote-unquote, celebrate it. But, boy oh boy, did the celebration quickly turn from something that seemed like it was going to be a somber goodbye at best to a, oh, this is just a goodbye at worst. As the Gamage begins, everyone of said number, 33 that being, withers away into a set of flowers, including Sophie herself, leaving Gustave, 32 at his current age, to set out on an expedition. Expedition, that being 33. To face off against the one they assume is the one responsible, the paintress. The one you can see at the middle of the poster there, with the long hair idling down in this sitting pose. But why, oh why, does the paintress paint, indeed? Oh boy, does the story have the obvious twist in retrospect, but it did leave a fantastical impression as you set off on said expedition. It is within moments of landing there that you are beset by an older gentleman by the name of Renoir, the man who claims that, later on especially, that he is doing what is best for this world, or your characters, in this sort of final goodbye soiree of sorts. And I'm sure that there are those who will say, and probably have said, that Renoir, and Verso by extension, have done nothing wrong. And to this game's credit, at least when I initially played it, well, I'll get there, but I'll pause. You see, I'm not done quite telling the story. It is here where Gustave is met after almost wanting to, after a near party wipe, being solo for quite a bit, and seeing what is left has completely shifted the paradigm in an extreme manner. The consequences are immediate. So much so that the only recourse he sees is to indeed commit suicide. However, he is then met by Lune, one of the survivors. It is only then he is able to pull himself out of this rut as the continuous threats of this world present themselves. Onward from this, the two eventually find Mealle from before. She has been locked away in this peculiar mansion of sorts, and her expressions and attitudes seem to be almost as if it's a dream. And this is definitely one of the very earliest hints in-game that you get that something is definitely off outside of just the world itself. And upon beating it in retrospect, there are even plenty of other hints in combat and so on and so forth that explicitly kind of give away the story in a sense. I like to think of this, and I would say this is a very praiseworthy thing. This feels like very early Hideo Kojima. I'm talking about like Metal Gear Solid 2 Hideo Kojima, when this guy was like predicting future bullshit like a decade before it happened. Like that level of like, oh, we are actually retrospectively showing something rather explicit through various means. And I've heard people say that the story is too exposition heavy, or that and conversely, I've also heard that the story is so sparse that you learn so little information all at the same time, and that the story just dumps so much info at you at the end of the story. But I couldn't disagree more. If anything, there are so many hints, but just enough that you're always consistently wondering, from the journals to what the characters are saying in combat and stuff like this. It's just enough to make you wonder, but it's never too much to land the exact landing. At least that's where I ended up. And I think that's some expert writing, if you ask me. Because I do think that you can reach the conclusion, and I don't necessarily even think that that's a flaw. I think that's one of the greatest strengths of Expedition 33 in terms of its writing. Sure, it is technically a mystery, but it's a mystery that I don't think is meant to be withheld that long, necessarily. And the hints just keep piling up pretty consistently from the very idea of Renoir himself. This poses way too many questions for the idea of this Expedition just being what it is far too simple. There has to be some more complex elements at play. So the player is consistently engaged in this idea throughout their adventure. And the journals are scattered throughout the world, so these various tidbits and, characters that are solidified themselves in various ways and died in various ways and so on and so forth, seems to exposit quite a number of things without ever really spelling it out. Now again, there are some journals that go way further and explicitly say what is going on, but those are really geared at the end of the game rather than the beginning. Again, the information is a lot more drip-fed early on, and is a lot more explicit later on, and I do think that that is very much intentional. And very, very well handled. Expert writing at its finest. Everything, or most things, feel like they have a setup, conclusion, and payoff in terms of storytelling. That, to me, is expert writing at its finest. It knows how to stick to the basics, and it knows how to incorporate every living character that you play as in the game to explore one of the heaviest subjects in the game throughout. That being grief. Every character goes through some form of grief. This is explicit. They say as such. And yet, the world finds time to find balance. It's not just grief alone. There is humor, there is frustration, there is anger, there is joy. All brims of emotion are felt throughout this game, and you are right there with the characters as they are experiencing these emotions. I've seen plenty of reactions of when people meet Minoko later on in the game, and his little goofy sudden want to duel, and this is meant to be a moment of levity. And I've seen the majority of people just absolutely find themselves enraptured by Minoko's whimsical wanting to duel as it lands for virtually everyone I've seen play through that section of the game. Even the most diabolical of critics that I have lambasted in the past couldn't even deny it themselves, I have seen. Oh, indeed, indeed. But that is why you're probably never going to see someone like EFAP actually cover Expedition 33 at all. They said as such. Mealle did. That's who I was referring to when I said someone with a very cynical view on things. But hey, like I said, I'm never opposed to just directly calling out YouTubers. I've never been opposed to it. You know this if you know my channel at all. But I digress. You see, as you move closer to the paintress, meaning Ciel and Minoko, in the process of rounding out your team, something quite extraordinary happens in between that moment. Before meeting Minoko, that is. And that is the death of Gustave. The main character that you have been leading the charge with dies at the hands of none other than Renoir, who again says that this is a form of sympathy, a form of like pity or something, or whatever he says. And this is the most important part of the game. I cannot stress this enough. What this moment accomplishes is so much that I don't think even the people who are glazing this story have, really grappled with what the amount of things this is all accomplishing at once. The most important is something that I have from countless reviews of my, of my long-standing years of YouTube, there has been a trope in the world of review, of video game stories in general, that has been lambasted. It has been sort of like the dark sheep of tropes among them. That being the what is it called? I'm trying to think of the name off the top of my head. I should have wrote it down. I knew I should have written it down. It is it's not subverting expectations. Well, it does do that, in a sense, through what this is actually doing. Oh, the bait and switch. The bait and switch. I've heard this term so many times as a reviewer, and I have typically heard every time someone uses the bait and switch, it is followed up by, "That was dog shit, I hated it." This story does the bait and switch, and it is the best bait and switch in video game history. And maybe story history. It is number one. Because, let me just remind you what I just said. Gustav has, for the most part, been the main character that you have been guided through, even though you can technically shift characters at free will. The story is still told through Gustav's lens up until this point. And the story does a bait and switch. This is so fucking daring that I have to make a reference to a video game that also did this. And it was dog shit. The Last of Us 2. You all know, if you've played or heard of anyone talking about The Last of Us 2, probably what I'm talking about. The death of Joel. This was a bait and switch at the time, and people hated it. They hated it because by the extension of what it led to was disappointment. It was all the story about revenge at the time, but yet when it came down to getting the ultimate revenge, it was passed off, and it wasn't players' choice. That is crucial in reference to Expedition 33. There is a very purposeful reason I'm bringing up Last of Us 2, because they both do something similar. And this does it in one game versus Last of Us that took 2 games to do it, did it so early on in the second game, and then completely fumbled the bag of the death. Now, there is a very third and crucial story that I think needs to be told here. That being The Walking Dead and Stranger Things, and why I think those two things are very important for this story in context. You see, Walking Dead provided something that I think is very crucial to understand about this, the death of a character thing going on that I'm referring to. You see, when a character died, a particular one, long, overdue spoiler alert that I have spoiled a few times already, the death of Glenn. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why I coined the term the Negan effect. The Negan effect is so fascinating to me because at the time, everyone abandoned, or a vast majority of people abandoned the show The Walking Dead when Glenn died in the show. And I think when it came to television, not video games, television, a lot of people, Stranger Things, became explicitly afraid of killing main characters because of such an overwhelming backlash. a backlash that left The Walking Dead in absolute shambles, despite being one of the best episodes of television history, and having one of the best story horror deaths of all time. All time! Glenn's death is horrific. And yet, despite being so well handled, so many people left. And that fear, I feel, carried over to stories like Stranger Things. Because so many people are like, oh, why did nobody die in the finale of Stranger Things? I think it's in response to the Negan effect. The thing that I coined. Yes, I'm aware, but I'm giving it an example so other people can start utilizing this term, hopefully correctly, with fingers crossed. So the Negan effect is really interesting to me, because this game breaks that rule. It says, no, we don't have to be afraid to kill a main character. Here we go. In a video game, put forward by a bunch of people who left, a big ultra company and set off to do their little smaller game, and thank goodness it paid off. Because the other thing Gustav does, in contrast to just being the bait and switch, is that his legacy, through the various things that you've done all the way up until that point, which isn't even all that long, all things considered, or it could have been very long depending on how you played the game, you have two very distinct reactions. I feel. Either you're going to be slightly heartbroken that Gustav died if you're just driving through the main story, or you're going to be even more devastated the more time you spent with Gustav. But that is player's choice. That's what immediately breaks it away from The Last of Us 2. It took the failure of The Last of Us 2 not having a choice and inserted the choice way before, while additionally having an additional choice later on. That is how you just absolute break the system and open the floodgates. Yes, yes, yes. We need so many more stories that are willing to do what this story does. Absolutely. And with that, this is exactly why this story is masterclass. And what Gustav leaves behind, as I was just mentioning, is the Lumina converted. It seeps directly into its gameplay. It's not just the story. The story is hooked to the gameplay, and the gameplay is hooked to the story. There is no detachment. There is no, this level of disarray between the player, the characters they are witnessing, and the events that are taking place. Again, I point to, right back to The Last of Us 2, where Ellie is on a killing spree, doesn't ever feel like she's on a killing spree, and then when everybody's ramped up to do the final kill, she finally decides to not do the final kill. All lacking character choice. Here, character choice will help you in determining how hooked you were in to Gustav as a character. And that couldn't be more helped in my first and second playthrough, and that continued to be very much true of the gameplay on top of that. So the beauty is doubled. That is what expertise gaming is all about. But the story continues. And so, with our crew finally fully established when Verso arrives, Then, and only then, you can take control of the bait-and-switch character, Verso. From here, you play as Verso and the rest of Expedition 33. However, every time you're in the camp, you play explicitly as Verso. This is very much still very intentional, especially for the first time around. And based off of what I've seen, I don't know the percentiles, but there is a choice at the end of the game, you know, the very thing The Last of Us 2 had, that directly involves Verso and another character in Mealle. And we'll get there. But for the time being, these two are together, as well as the rest of Expedition 33. But there are some trials and tribulations along the way, facing off against the Axons, and now you are more integrated into figuring out more about your companions along the way. Every time you camp and have achieved a gameplay goal, it is met with story progression. So it's story progression, gameplay, story progression, gameplay. There's an ebb and flow that never feels disingenuous, you know, misogynist. The pacing is just absolutely fluid in every ounce of this game. It's so intentional. And so, eventually, they do reach the Paintress. And bombshell after so-called bombshell unveils upon itself here when they finally do reach the Paintress. But not even then. That's what's most fascinating about this story, is yet you beat the Paintress in a overwhelming anime-esque type battle, of course, of what seems fitting of a finale, and yet the story is not over. There's something left unsettled. And then the final truth bombs hit. Number one, the Paintress was signaling a warning sign to all the expeditioners using her power, and it was the painter Renoir. He was the one enacting the gommage. Number two, the world itself is a painting. All these characters are, as some people would argue, figments. They are not real. And that is an immediate failure of the player who is making that argument. Every character has a heart, a soul, a personality. This is very hearkening to one of my favorite franchises growing up in Digimon. There's a reason I'm a fan of Digimon. Digimon is almost virtually the same idea. The only exception of it being a painting is digital creatures. Are these digital creatures just ones and zeros, or are they something more? The story of that posits there is something more, explicitly so. Of course there is. They have personalities, souls, even despite being digital, and so on and so forth. And I had been waiting to see another story hit on something of this magnitude. Now, in sort of me experiencing it, like I said, I haven't experienced a story quite like this since Digimon, and I'm aware that there are other stories out there that very much touch on this subject, but I hadn't experienced them. But here we were, and, of course, with that warning, everyone within the painted world is whisked away, including Mealle. She is the very last. And then we are taken aback. We get a flashback to several years before, where Mealle, in the real world, the world of France, is very much suffering after this fire we have been alluded to throughout its story. This through these flashbacks and gray paintings and fire, moves that are integral to Mealle's gameplay. Suspiciously so, too much to say that that is not a coincidence, again, intentional. And so it becomes crystal clear what is happening. The world is letting us know how we got here, what led to this, how has this world even enveloped, and we learn more about Renoir and the paintress herself, Aline. We get her name at this juncture of the game. It is here we see the two combating in the world of the painting, before the game, because it's a flashback. And so it is Mealle who is tasked through Clair to, after she fucks off for her war, that Mealle is going to step in. She is painted over, as that is expressed as she tries to make her way in. She is reborn into the world, and thus she is the amnesia-type character. But we already had so much experience with Mealle that having the amnesia cleverly placed later on instead of being on the offset, it's almost as if the amnesia, something that is typically harped on, is something that goes, oh, that's actually really smart. And it's all due to placement. Placement is key. It's intentional. It's left to be let here that you figure out that, of course, Mealle had been suffering through amnesia. There were hints of it, but now it is confirmed. And this game never explicitly has to say she has amnesia. I am able to pull that away from what the game is showing me. Show, don't tell, after all. And with that, Mealle, after regaining it into this space, we fast forward to where we were when Mealle reappears in the painted world, now rocking the white hair, and confronts Verso, who is the only one remaining left. You see, Verso is a stagnated soul that is stuck here because his painted version, the one who painted this entire canvas, in fact, his soul is stuck here. Thus, he, by extension, is also stuck here in this form, this more physical form, as it were. And it's so interesting how the story instantly reframes everything. Reframes. Pun intended, might I add. You're welcome. But I digress in saying that it is now seemingly the idea that Verso has been here for so long and that he's so tired of the world that he's been just trapped in, forced to paint, forced to do this thing that he sort of admits that he likes, but being forced into that idea, forced to do it, that is the part that has been, shackled to him. He wants to be set free. And so, with this very reframing, I saw a lot of players, myself included for at least first time around, pick Verso's ending first. And I think this is very intentional as well, even though Mealle's ending is just as compelling and interesting, and we'll get there in due time. Actually, very shortly. Point being is that this is an ending where Verso does it again. He erases the painted world by defeating Mealle and getting the little soul version of Verso to stop painting, thus erasing everything in the painted world. And the the reasoning that a lot of people seem to come away with is that it is the idea that Mealle needs to grow up, which I find fascinating, because I'm gonna take a wild take in just a bit, but here we are. You see, the first time round, I also, as I just mentioned, chose this ending. I had actually initially felt that too, once the world was reframed in this way. I felt that Mealle had to grow up. At the time, that's true. However, it was only after my 4th playthrough that something in me clicked, and I said, oh, I am so wrong. I had been led to believe something so fundamentally broken that it portrays the very idea of the reason I love Digimon. And that, to me, came across over those 4 playthroughs. But something even more important happened in that time frame. You see, everybody has thrown in their 2 cents about whose ending is the better ending, quote unquote. And that, to me alone, is expert. That is masterclass. The fact that there is even a fight of whose ending is correct in it of itself is masterful writing. That is how you give players choice. That is how you make a story in a video game that has meaning, purpose, impact, and more importantly, choice. This game does not hold your hand. It does not force you to do anything you don't want to do except make that choice. But the choice is ultimately up to you. You either choose Verso's world, where he destroys the painted world, or you choose Mealle's ending, where you keep that world intact. And there is consequence to both. Either the world dies and all of these souls die, explicitly so, because they are people, they have souls, that much I am not going to back down from. Or Mealle keeps the world as it is, and she eventually dies from a sickness. That is very much also confirmed by the end of the whole visual aspect, without, again, having to tell us anything. Mealle's ending and Verso's ending are silent. Everything that happens in both endings have no dialogue whatsoever. It is purely visual storytelling and just masterclass. Just 10 out of 10 storytelling here. That is my score. I'm sure that you shouldn't be surprised that I'm giving this a 10 out of 10. This is Game of the Year. But it earned it. It earned it every step of the way. There is nothing I have to complain about in this story. But I did say that I was going to explicitly tell you why I felt Mealle's ending, to me, felt more better. The better ending. I'm going to throw my 2 cents into this before moving on to the gameplay. Mealle's ending is all about keeping the world intact, making sure that all of these living souls return and have a chance to live. That alone is quite a lot. But it doesn't end there. You see, something I noticed is that both Verso and Mealle have something in common. At some part of both of their lives want to die. This is very important. Verso's ending is obvious. He destroys the whole world, including himself. That one is a given, but Mealle's one, that one's even more interesting, isn't it? Because she isn't the one who vanishes. It's her painted version that says, "Get rid of me. Help me pass away." Mealle says goodbye to her. She removes the shackles of her former pain in the third Axon fight. And none of it's told to us. It's shown to us. Despite her abrupt decision. And I heard so many people say, this is Mealle's villain turn. No. The moment you say that, you misunderstood everything that section was trying to show you. Her painted version explicitly asked, let me be with my family. Let me pass away. This is explicitly told. So I'm not sure why Mealle suddenly turned into a villain. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the scene. So that is a reach at best. And a far misunderstanding at worst. And a character assassinating at far, far worse, which is something I heard, yes, people say. And it's like, these people have no clue what the fuck they're talking about. They have no idea. They weren't paying attention to what was being asked of them. So, it sort of reminds me of Stranger Things, when Will asks, when he's ready to come out of the closet, he says, I want everyone to be in the room, and then have people complain, like the little platoon, why is everybody in the room? I wonder if you paid attention to basic bitch dialogue instead of having to lie, like the little platoon does in his coverage, alongside being flanked by every single member of EFAP who aids in this lie, explicit lie, and they lose nothing. They get paid because they're grifters at this point. As far as that video for me, their coverage of Stranger Things made me go, oh, they've just turned to grifters at this point. They are just willing to lie about everything at this point. How do I trust them with any of their coverage? I'm avoiding their RE9 coverage, RE Requiem, because I'm still going through the game myself. But I already saw thumbnails of people within EFAP, and I know they covered it. I've not watched the coverage or any of the... I've seen the thumbnails, though. I've seen every single one of them say, RE's a disappointment. RE's a disappointment. I can guarantee you most of them are probably lying at this point, then. What else am I supposed to believe? They lied about Stranger Things, a show that's fine at best. Fine. Let me repeat that word. Fine. It's not fantastic. It's not terrible. It's fine. Remember that word? I wish we can go back to that word. That word is fine. But here, we don't have to worry about that. We can have so many people just misunderstand things completely. Mealle isn't the villain here. She never was. She was a victim this entire fucking video game, if you've been paying attention, through the context clues. And she's finally, in this moment, releasing that victimhood mentality. And yet, people want to point to the ending choice and saying, oh, she's too young. Yet she does the most grown-up thing in the entire video game in this moment. The third Axon fight is her being more adult than Verso, than Lune, than Ciel, than Minoko, and most importantly, Renoir. And even Aline. She's being the most adult moment. That is what that moment actually is. It is her being an adult. Forced to be an adult in that moment. That's the reason Mealle's ending is better, for me, after really thinking about it. And it gets worse for Verso by extension. Because all the other bits of Verso that have been plaguing me through the previous not being able to talk about it until a review portion of this, Verso conversely, is the one who's been acting childish this entire fucking time by comparison. Jesus Christ. This motherfucker has been gaslighting and gaslighting and gaslighting. That has been his go-to, and Minoko, the good pup that he is, can only follow because he's the best boy. And Verso, conversely, is the worst guy. But I digress. What makes Verso's gaslighting more impressive is that it falls apart when they defeat the Paintress. Everyone sees when they return, when Mealle brings them back, Lune and Ciel, because those are the two that get gommaged at the end there. They are the ones who are like, dude, you totally fucked up. And they're both absolutely correct. Like, it's so beautiful. It's just so warranted. And to make matters even more interesting, again, for those who have claimed, and again, I'm pretty sure they're out there, of the people who said Renoir did nothing wrong, or Verso did nothing wrong, even though he's been gaslighting this entire fucking time, like a child. He totally gets that from his dad. Not from Aline. From his dad. The guy who apparently did nothing wrong. And you know what? Renoir's an asshole. He's the worst. He's also the worst. People say he did nothing wrong. He did everything wrong. That is how off those people are. This motherfucker had the audacity to act as the curator and just sit around and watch as his own daughter, Mealle, take all the risk, all the gambles, take every single action, every single pain, every single interaction. He just stands and upgrades your items and upgrades your luminas and weapons, and that's it. The fucking laziest son of a bitch, Renoir. That is who Renoir really is. You see, when Renoir in that flashback is the one coming to Aline, who's already upset, and having Aline walk out on him, I can see why. This motherfucker was probably lazy in his real life. Jesus fucking Christ. What an asshole. This fucker just sat there, stood there, idling. Even when you make your way to making the Axon weapon, the barrier destroyer, what does he do? He waits. How on earth can people claim that Renoir does nothing wrong, and yet he refuses to step up to the Paintress? This is what this entire adventure, the first time round, that's all this has been leading up to. Yet this motherfucker lazily just stood there and continued to have stood there while Mealle was behaving like the adult. Mealle was the adult all along. And the final act of her adulthood was her shedding off that guilt. I am not gonna be that painted version of me. And to make Renoir even worse. Oh, it gets worse from Renoir. You think I was done? Bitch, please. Renoir has the audacity, and I cannot believe people would excuse this one. This is just the ultimate of gaslighting. The ultimate of gaslighting, and it made me go, oh my god, This is where Verso literally gets this from. No wonder why Verso's an asshole. It couldn't have been helped. His father was an asshole. Renoir has the audacity. The fucking audacity at the end-all be-all of, when you're getting ready to encounter him, not the paintress after that. When you're getting ready to encounter him, Renoir, the paintress comes back. Aline comes back. And what does Renoir say? This motherfucker gaslights so fucking hard that I was in awe that people just let this line just slip right under their radar. It is baffling to me. This fucking son of a bitch, had the audacity to gaslight this. He had the potential to paint safely, to not fly too close to the sun, as he puts it. To paint safely. This motherfucker had the audacity to say that in front of Mealle, to say that in front of Aline. And she, the painted version of Aline, the big behemoth figurine back there, was buying into the gaslighting. And it was like, what the fuck? What do you mean to paint safely? Hasn't that been the problem this entire fucking video game, Renoir? Isn't that the biggest lie you have ever fucking told, you gaslighting piece of dog shit? You motherfucker. You had the audacity to lie that badly. Because if you had the ability to paint safely, you would think you would teach Mealle how to paint safely so that none of this game would have ever happened. This video game is literally Renoir's fault. In part, it is also Aline's fault, but it is equally, if not more so, his fault, if this gaslighting is to be believed. If he is to truly be believed, then he is even more at fault than Aline is. That's just basic facts. I don't know how else to put this. But that's the beauty of the first time playthrough, because you felt sympathy for Renoir. You started to feel bad for Renoir. A lot of these lines might have gone over people's heads, not mine. I've played it 4 times. And that line finally hit in a different way when I heard it. I went, what the fuck do you mean, Renoir? What the fuck do you mean, paint safely, huh? If you could have done that, then Mealle's ending paint safely, sure, you piece of dog shit, you keep lying. And so, that is what brings me back to Mealle's ending, in its true beauty. Because she is an adult. She's an adult who, I would argue, is rightfully punishing Verso. Absolutely. This fucker deserves every bit of absolute... the game is trying to paint it, it's all in black and white. The game is trying its best to paint itself as, oh no, look at Verso, he's being forced to play piano, the thing that he claimed to love to do. Just like how he was forced to paint. But now he's being forced to do the thing he actually loves to do. Oh no! The audacity of Mealle doing that after all the fucking gaslighting that he put her through due to his childish actions, while she was gallivanting about there first, being the only adult in the situation. Between, at least, the two of them. What Lune and Ciel bring are the pragmatic approach to grief, in the letting go of grief in Ciel, in the in-moment grief of Minoko, and when he loses Noko. grief is consistent within all the characters. Mealle, obviously, with Gustave. Verso with nobody. And that is explicit. That is explicit in when you reach the Axon, who's fucking with everybody's memories, and everybody sees a version of somebody who's been left behind. But who doesn't have anybody? Verso. He's the only character, suspiciously, even in that moment, who has nobody to grieve for, even though he claims to grieve for one of the expeditioners. So was it really ever grief? Or was he gaslighting himself at that point? I think it's easily the latter, because this motherfucker has been nothing but gaslighting this entire time. That's probably what led him down barreling in on himself, because I started to note something very interesting. The young Verso. There's a lot of lines of the young Verso defending the world. The young Verso seems to be more in line with Mealle's point of view, and the latter Verso, the one we're playing as, seems to be the only one inclined, with the exception of Minoko, because he's just following his owner at this point, to end everything in oblivion. And that, it comes from, you guessed it, selfishness. The thing he proclaims Mealle is guilty of. Mealle, who's racked herself with grief over losing the real Verso. You know, the one you can actually feel sympathy for. Apologies if you saw anything pop up there. Anyway, point being that this is the culmination of why I think Mealle's ending is the good ending. It's beyond just liberation. It's actually about growing up. Which mirrors Verso's ending about growing up, except you just genocided an entire world to do so. You grew up, and actually both endings is the secret to both endings, you see. One just has you genocide an entire world that you, the player, have to decide is either worth letting go of or holding on to. That is the key. That is what it actually only boils down to. But it's wrapped up in so many layers. That's what makes the choice so fascinating explicitly the first time around when I chose Verso's ending, conversely so. It's because I didn't catch on to lines like Renoir's. It's because of the initial reframing of the game that made me think that Verso's ending was the quote-unquote better one. But in far as deeper inspection and deeper analysis, I recognized that no, Mealle's ending explicitly also has her growing up. It's not her explicitly holding on to her childhood, even though it's holding on to her grief. Grief does not stop when you are a child. That is something that is crucial to remember about this game. Grief lives on in us through our entire lives. It is not something that goes away when you become an adult. That is not real. That's the fiction. That's the fiction. Letting go is the fiction. That's the pretend. That's the Clair Obscur. That's what it is. The idea that you can simply get rid of grief, that simply just letting go, moving on, as so many claim that that's what Verso's ending's truly about, that's the lie. Because you can't let go of grief. Grief follows you into adulthood. You will continue to lose people as you grow. You will grieve as an adult. Grief follows you. That is adulthood, it's childhood, it's everything in between. That's Mealle's ending. That's the true beauty of Mealle's ending. Is that she will die too. Everyone dies. It's how she chose to die is what really mattered. She removed her shackle first. She let her grief go in terms of her painted version of herself. She grew up. And she brought back a world filled with souls, filled with people. That's not selfishness. How could it be? It can't be. They're real. She's giving other people a chance, a choice to live their lives, even though she's punishing Verso. And again, that version of Verso, the gaslighting Verso, the lying Verso. That Verso, again, I would argue, deserves to be punished in that way. And that, to me, is masterclass. When you can reevaluate the ending in an entirely different way. But hey, I say Mealle's ending is better. I'm sure there will be still those who say Verso's ending is better. And I'm sure that rivalry will live on. But that's the beauty of choice. That's it. That's the beauty of choice. But that's just the 10 out of 10 story. But what about the 10 out of 10 gameplay, I hear you ask? Oh, don't worry. We can finally get there. So the gameplay is a turn-based game, in which you have a competitive set of moves. You can either do normal attacks, which build up points, which you can do to use skills. And conversely, so once you use your skills, they take up a certain amount of points, and you have to rebuild and think about moves in that sort of way. It is a turn-based game in that once your turn is over, eventually your enemies will go, if they're not dying in one hit inevitably. But the game has a parry or dodge system, and this changes the game. The parry system alone argues that it never actually stops having to be your turn, if you get good. If you learn the timing, it never actually stops being your turn in the video game. That's the secret of Expedition 33's masterclass in gameplay. It never ever has to stop being your turn. You just have to get good. And so, in my first playthrough of the game, I was doing a pretty lackluster understanding job of the Lumina system. So what is the Lumina system after all this time of all the stories? So the Lumina system is a set of skills, a set of ongoing skills that is displayed for your entire team. And they are locked through the Pictos, the set of 3 that you can select among your characters. And once you do 4 battles, they turn into a Lumina, a skill that can be passed on to everyone. These skills are consistent and they stack on top of each other. And I had a very, very poor understanding of the Lumina system. Not the Picto system, the Lumina system. I had no idea that I could just keep stacking Luminas on top of Luminas on top of Luminas. I only did so ever so barely in my very first time around. And as such, my first gameplay experience through was substantially a lot more challenging than I noticed than other people that had learned to do the Luminous system. It's a completely different game with Luminous on and off. And remember who built the Lumina converter? It was Gustav. You see, his death is for those who come after through the Lumina converter. The saying lives on through the gameplay. That is how you write consistently through the video game and the gameplay and the story. Again, Mealle's moves. Why does she have so many fire moves in comparison to everyone else? It's because she blames herself in the fire that they exposit at a later point in the story that she felt she caused, and everyone else seems to also blame Mealle, and everyone, Aline is blaming her, Renoir is blaming her, Verso is dead, the real Verso is dead, the animated or cartooned version of Verso is gaslighting as he does. And so Mealle's moves are oriented around her guilt. Lune is pragmatic. Yet, what makes her so fascinating is that she controls the elements, the magics of the world in various different ways, either very fire, water, or earth, or lightning being the four, core elements in terms of this game. But there are some other elements that are later locked onto, such as dark and light. But I digress in saying that Lune plays very elemental focus, so I prioritized her fire abilities myself, but I learned the Genesis system on my second and third playthrough, and boy, did that change her system to just being explicitly that from that point moving forward. And then there is Ciel. She is the one, remembering from the story, who's very, very oriented around accepting fate. And her abilities, she has the whole card bit, very gambling based. And conversely so, though, she, by extension, ends up aiding the other allies more so than herself. She's a very backup-oriented character, but she can also be utilized in a very stacking in her own right type of way. If you want to play her either of those two ways, characters can play very differently depending on what type of character type you kind of want to do with these. And Minoko, dear God, Minoko is the most, heavy-centric, gameplay-oriented character there is. He is known as he's a different type of mage. He gains the abilities of all the opponents. This is something that I've seen carried over from Final Fantasy to this. But in this, there's a few more little interesting steps along the way. Every enemy type has a certain amount of moves because the moves are oriented in this sort of colored variants. But the golden one is the one you want to aim for to do the most damage because the golden one amplifies your moves, doubly so. And so to get there, every shift turns the wheel by a certain amount. Some enemies you turn into will turn it 2, some 3, some 4, and some 5, so on and so forth. So you have to orient the skills in both color and position. So that's Minoko's entire setup. And Verso, rounding out the team, is actually Dante Inferno, get good, S tier, unironic, S tier, get good, Verso. That's his entire gimmick if you're orienting around him fighting, at least. So of course I prefer orienting my characters around fighting. And then once I learned of the breaking ability, I oriented everyone to be able to break. At least every one of my characters had to have one breaking ability. Breaking became one of the key elements in all of my future playthroughs of this game, once I learned of that system. But you learn through it pretty early on, it's just getting there for later on purposes is what's key. And so every character has pretty simplistic gimmicks. CLM Minoko's probably the hardest to figure out in terms of like how to better utilize those two, and the other three are far more simplistic, surprisingly even Lune. Despite having very varying different elements, again, just relying on the elemental trick and explosion of elemental trick, whatever that other move is called. Those two moves are all you eventually will need for Lune, that's for sure. Anyway, point being is that every character plays unique, and each kind of pushes and pulls through their characterization. So again, it really just orients that masterclass of just making sure that every character, that there is no character that is like bad to play as, technically. Every character can not only be mastered, but every character stands out. There are no bad characters in this game in terms of pure gameplay. Verso, despite being the Gaslighter, is a fucking excellent character to play as. If people came up to me and said, X character is my favorite character to play as, I'd be like, yeah, I understand any of those choices. Any of them. That, to me, is a peak form of making sure that all of your characters stand out. There aren't too many characters to overwhelm, and there are just enough characters to where you're picking 3 of those 5, and you know, to whoever 3 you pick, those are likely the ones you're going to master. Eventually, I like to swap in from time to time when I play the game now, because I like reminding myself of like, oh yeah, that's how the character plays. And keeping the characters up to date and close together. Now, there is this real want and potential desire to mid-max, your Mealle or your Verso initially, because those two come across as the main characters, and they are. And so I've seen other people do that, and that's completely on them. And conversely, I found myself later on, again, divvying up the points evenly, and that was up to me. Player choice. Again, masterclass. There are several areas, several side quests, there are replayable bosses with slightly different gimmicks and elemental configurations, and challenges along the way from Chapter 3, explicitly so, to keep you engaged far even after the Paintress is defeated, up until defeating Renoir. And of course, there is the DLC. The DLC is called Verso's Drafts, and conversely from Renoir's Drafts, who has the most craziest enemy in Simone, that I only beat on doing the one-shot technique at a certain point in juncture. Yes, you can get to that point in the initial getting through that character boss through every boss, but I digress in saying that takes an unfortunate number of grinding that I feel like it makes the grinding worth it. And you don't get that a lot in a lot of video games. Not a lot of video games will make the grind worth it. But this game does. I would argue it does. So much so. But conversely, yes, Verso's Drafts is free DLC, as I had mentioned far earlier in this review. Here we see what Kid Verso was up to. His very cartoony imagery. Young Verso and young Minoko getting up to hijinks. Young Eskie included. The character nobody I have seen hate. Not a single person would dare hate Eskie. He is far too lovable. This is so much so that he is on the level of Minoko, but even plus-sized, and plus-adventured, and plus-huggabled. So, yes. And so, Verso's drafts incorporates many more, candy-oriented type of enemies. A lot of candy-themed. And of course, trains. A thing that Verso alludes to being something he just likes for some, you like what you like, I guess, It's one of those moments where you like where you like. I can't say I like trains to that degree, that's for sure. But he likes trains, so yeah, he includes trains in his youthful drafts. And of course, with Eskie, we finally get to meet his inverse. I think his name is just the opposite of Oscale or something, or however you say his name, or whatever it was. Point being, is the DLC offers more battles, more costumes, and so on. The location to me was a little off where I thought it was going to be. There's this path, this wide water path on the right-hand side of the map that is actually inaccessible through the main game. I thought that's actually the area that it was going to incorporate. You were going to actually get a break through that section of the painted world and enter that section of the map. I thought that's what the free DLC was going to be located when that was first unleashed and unfolded upon us. But no, it was closer to Lumiere in terms of location, but whatever. Point being is that free DLC is always going to get a thumbs up from me, and that to me explicitly shows the love the creators had for this game and wanted to thank the people who gave this game its fair shot. To me, if I would ever get the blessings of making a video game and having sold a video game that well, that would be my ultimate dream too. Give free DLC. Give back to the people who gave me a chance. That would be the reward in it of itself. I mean, as somebody who wrote and published Syndicate X, my book, and it's a dog shit book, and I always have it by my side, off screen, of course, as a constant reminder of my failure. If that book had an opportunity to turn into a video game, and that video game, and unlike my book, actually sold really well, I'd be like, free DLC, guys. You absolutely blew away my expectations. This gameplay is also just a 10 out of 10. This is masterclass. And wherever these lot end up, if I hear an announcement that I know it is the people from whoever made Clair Obscur Expedition 33 just considered me bought right now, I want to know where they want to go next. I want to see their adventure, wherever it may be. If it's a sequel that explores Claire's war, or if it's something entirely different. Either way, I am on board. I want to support this team moving forward. Yes, we need more of this. Absolutely we do. And to that I say, this game deserved all the accolades, and I gave it my fair shake. That is my full review of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. But hey, for those who move on forward, if you liked this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description when we'll head you to my petition to help out small YouTubers, for those who come after. to my PayPal, where you can help support me and do all my stuff directly. And third, to my Discord server, we can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.